The rain came down in sheets, hard and unrelenting, turning Lagos traffic into chaos. Horns blared, wipers screeched, headlights cut through the blur. Sophia Arden gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles white. It was almost 10 p.m., far later than she liked to be out. A dinner with foreign investors had dragged longer than expected. She should have taken a company car, but she hadn't wanted to explain to anyone why her driver had suddenly quit 2 weeks ago. Independence was easier. Independence was cleaner. But Independence also had her stranded on 3rd Mainland Bridge, in the middle of a storm, with her SUV coughing like it had swallowed water. The engine gave a final shudder and died. Sophia cursed under her breath, slamming her palm against the wheel. Outside, the rain pounded. The bridge stretched endless and empty, save for the occasional Danfo speeding dangerously by. She tried her phone. Battery dead. Her chest tightened. She hated this, hated feeling helpless, hated being at the mercy of circumstance. She could negotiate million-dollar deals, silence a boardroom full of men, but now she sat in a dead car, rain leaking through the edges of her window, heart pounding against her ribs. For the first time in years, she felt vulnerable. She didn't see him approach at first. Just a tall shadow cutting through the rain, moving toward her with steady steps. Instinct flared, fear. Her hand reached for the pepper spray in her purse. Then he came closer, the rain sliding down his face, soaking through a simple shirt that clung to his broad frame. His features sharpened under the glow of her hazard lights, strong jawline, full lips, eyes that were surprisingly calm for a man walking in a storm. "Madam," his voice carried over the rain, deep and even, "your car stopped?" Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Stay back. Don't come closer." He lifted his hand slightly, palms open. Not defensive, not threatening. Just steady. "I won't hurt you. But your exhaust's flooded. If you keep turning the key, you'll only kill the battery." Her suspicion warred with her desperation. She didn't like the way her heart jumped at the steadiness in his tone. "Do you know cars?" she asked cautiously. A corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "Enough to get you moving again." Sophia hesitated. Then, with a curt nod, she pushed open the door. Rain slapped against her immediately, soaking her silk blouse. She hated that she shivered, from the cold, or from his presence, she wasn't sure. He crouched by the bonnet, rolled up his sleeves, and got to work. His hands were sure, precise, moving with the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The rain plastered his shirt against muscles that looked carved by struggle, not a gym. Sophia found herself watching, despite herself. "You shouldn't be out here this late, alone," he said without looking up. "I can take care of myself," she shot back quickly. That almost smile again. "So I see." Minutes later, he slammed the bonnet shut. "Try it now." She slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, the engine roared back to life. Relief flooded her chest. She stepped out again, rain dripping from her lashes. For a second, words failed her. Gratitude wasn't something she offered easily. "What's your name?" she asked finally. "Daniel," he said simply. Sophia studied him in the rain, the quiet strength, the eyes that didn't flinch or leer, the presence that unsettled her in ways she didn't want to admit. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer than she intended. He gave a small nod, already stepping back. "Get home safe, madam." And before she could say anything else, he disappeared into the rain, swallowed by the night. Sophia stood there for a beat too long, the image of him burned into her mind. She told herself it didn't matter. She'd never see him again. But life was about to prove her wrong. By morning, Daniel was back to reality. The rain had ruined his only good shoes. He had barely 500 naira left after buying bread for himself and his younger sister. His stomach gnawed with hunger. That was when he saw it, a sheet of paper flapping on a pole in Allen Avenue. Driver wanted. Immediate employment. Attractive pay. Apply within. Daniel let out a humorless laugh. After 4 years of university and a business administration degree, life had thrown him this. But pride didn't pay rent. Pride didn't buy medicine. Pride didn't feed Amara, his 16-year-old sister still in school. He tore the paper down, shoved it in his pocket, and whispered under his breath, "Better a driver than a beggar." Hours later, he found himself standing in front of a mansion that looked like something out of a foreign movie. Marble walls, gleaming gates, fountains whispering in the yard. Daniel adjusted his shirt, trying to appear confident as the guard ushered him inside. And then she walked in. Sophia Arden. For a moment, the world stilled. The woman he had pulled out of the storm stood before him, silk blouse replaced by a sharp navy suit, heels clicking like punctuation marks against the marble floor. Her eyes froze when they landed on him. You. Daniel's lips curved in that faint, steady smile. Good afternoon, madam. I came for the driver position. The silence between them was electric, disbelief, recognition, something unspoken sparking alive. Sophia's guard snapped back into place. She crossed her arms. Out of all the drivers in Lagos, it had to be you. And just like that, their story began. Welcome back to African Love Chronicles, your favorite place for stories soaked in passion and soul-deep romance. If you're new here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment to tell us your favorite part of the story. Your support keeps these love tales flowing strong. Thanks for your support. Now, grab your popcorn and let's dive in. The living room was too perfect. White leather couches arranged like they were on display, glass tables reflecting the chandelier light, a vase of lilies perfuming the air. Daniel stood awkwardly near the entrance, rain-worn shoes leaving faint marks on the marble. He wished the floor would swallow him whole. Across from him, Sophia sat with one leg crossed neatly over the other, an iPad in her lap. She hadn't looked at him again since the initial shock of recognition. Her face was composed now, cool, unreadable. The CEO mask firmly back in place. You came for the driver job, she said, her tone flat. Yes, madam. His voice was steady, respectful, but there was a quiet steel beneath it. She finally looked up, eyes sharp as glass. You have experience? Yes. What kind of experience? He hesitated. I've driven for delivery companies, and as a private cab driver. I also handle basic maintenance. She tilted her head. So no experience driving for executives? No, ma. He held her gaze, unflinching. But I learn fast. And I don't give excuses. Sophia tapped her iPad with the stylus, as though making a note. In reality, she was stalling. Her mind replayed last night, his steady hands under the rain, the calm way he had spoken when she was near panic. It unsettled her. This, awareness. She didn't like it. What did you study? She asked suddenly. Daniel blinked. Business Administration, University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Her brows lifted slightly. She hadn't expected that. And yet, here you are, she said dryly. His jaw tightened, but his tone stayed polite. Yes, ma. Here I am. The silence stretched between them, charged, brittle. Sophia leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. She should dismiss him. There were other applicants waiting. He wasn't what she had in mind. But then she remembered the way he had appeared out of the storm. How he hadn't flinched under her suspicion. How his hands hadn't trembled when the car engine had. She hated to admit it, but she trusted him. More than she trusted most men she knew. Can you start immediately? She asked. Daniel straightened, surprised. Yes, ma. You'll be on call whenever I need you. Day or night. No excuses, no lateness. If you're careless with my time, you're gone. Understood? Yes, ma. She rose to her feet, her heels clicking against the marble as she approached him. He was taller up close, forcing her to tilt her chin ever so slightly to meet his gaze. Her eyes lingered on his face for just a second too long, rain-soaked memory clashing with present reality. His features were almost too perfect, but not in a polished way. Ruggedly handsome, with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, lips that hinted at a smile he rarely gave, and eyes that held something she couldn't name. Sophia's chest tightened. She quickly pushed it down. Then it settled, she said briskly. Welcome, Mr. Daniel. You're my new driver. Daniel inclined his head, masking the flicker of relief in his eyes. Thank you, ma. As he left the room, Sophia finally exhaled. Her grip on the iPad was tighter than she realized. Hiring him had been a mistake. A necessary mistake. And one she already knew she might regret. The morning sun spilled over the mansion's tall windows, streaking the marble floors with light. Daniel stood outside by the SUV, freshly washed and gleaming, his shirt neatly pressed. He had woken before dawn, determined not to give her a single reason to doubt him. Still, his heart thudded as he checked his reflection in the car window. He wasn't vain, but he knew what people said when they first met him: handsome, almost intimidating. His tall frame, broad shoulders, and angular features often drew attention he hadn't asked for. Today, though, he wasn't thinking about strangers. He was thinking about her. The sound of heels echoed across the driveway. Daniel straightened immediately. Sophia appeared in a cream blouse tucked into navy trousers, her hair swept into a low chignon. The outfit was simple but radiated power, elegance that made heads turn. She carried herself like someone who had no time for nonsense, like every second was accounted for. "Good morning, madam," Daniel said, opening the back door for her. Her eyes flicked over him briefly: crisp shirt, polished shoes, calm stance. Something inside her noted how he cleaned up well. Too well. But her expression remained cool. "Morning," she replied curtly, sliding into the seat. Daniel shut the door softly, circled to the driver's seat, and started the engine. The silence stretched as they pulled out of the compound and onto the road. Lagos was already awake, hawkers darting between cars, danfos belching smoke, horns blaring like impatient arguments. Daniel drove with surprising ease, threading through the chaos without jerks or hesitation. His hands rested steady on the wheel, eyes scanning, movement smooth. Sophia noticed, though she told herself she wasn't noticing. She cleared her throat. "You know your way to Victoria Island?" "Yes, Ma," Daniel said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Shortcut through Lekki Phase 1 will save 15 minutes. Her brows arched slightly. Most drivers waited for instructions. He was confident, certain. "Fine. Do it." Silence again. Only the hum of the engine, the wail of horns outside. Then Daniel spoke, his tone casual. "You don't like talking in the car, Ma?" Sophia's eyes snapped up from her phone. "Excuse me?" He kept his eyes on the road, but there was the faintest glimmer of humor in his voice. "Some people do. Some don't. Just trying to know my boss better." Her lips parted in faint disbelief. No driver had ever dared tease her, even gently. "I don't hire drivers to make conversation," she said crisply. "Noted," Daniel said. His mouth twitched, like he was suppressing a smile. Sophia turned back to her phone, annoyed. At him. At herself. At the strange heat that spread in her chest at the almost smile she had caught. For the rest of the ride, they stayed quiet, but it wasn't the cold silence she was used to. It was charged, alive, as though words were hovering in the air, waiting to break free. When they reached her office building, Daniel parked smoothly and stepped out to open her door. She adjusted her blouse and heels, poised as ever, but her voice softened a fraction when she spoke. "You drive well," she admitted. "Thank you, Ma," Daniel said simply, though his eyes met hers briefly, and there was something there. Respect, yes. But also a spark, subtle, dangerous. Sophia looked away quickly, stepping past him into the towering glass doors of her office. Daniel watched her go, exhaling slowly. This job was supposed to be simple. Drive, earn, survive. But nothing about Sophia Arden felt simple. And somehow, he already knew, neither was this journey. The city had changed its colors. By the time Sophia left the office, Lagos had shed its daytime chaos for the slow, heavy rhythm of night. Streetlights flickered, hawkers waved roasted corn by the roadside, and tired commuters sagged inside crowded buses. Daniel leaned against the SUV, phone tucked in his palm, when she finally emerged from the building. It was almost 10 p.m. She looked exhausted, eyes shadowed, shoulders tense beneath her blazer, but still perfectly put together. He straightened instantly, pocketing his phone. "Good evening, Ma." She gave him a small nod, sliding into the back seat. Home. The ride started in silence. She kept her eyes on her tablet, fingers scrolling through endless emails. But Daniel noticed the way she blinked too often, the tiny sighs she gave when she thought no one heard. He switched the radio on, low. A soft Afro-soul track hummed through the speakers. Sophia glanced up, surprised. "Who told you to?" She stopped. The music was gentle, soothing. Her lips pressed together, but she didn't tell him to turn it off. Minutes passed, the hum of the city fading as they took the longer bridge route home. Outside, the water reflected scattered lights like broken stars. You always work this late? Daniel asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. Sophia looked up, startled. Excuse me? I said, he repeated calmly, eyes fixed on the road, do you always work this late? That's none of your concern, she said quickly. He didn't respond right away. The silence stretched, only the music filling the space. Then, softly, he said, you look tired, Ma. Her chest tightened. For a moment, she wanted to snap at him, to remind him of his place. But the words caught in her throat. Nobody said things like that to her. Nobody noticed. She turned to the window, hiding the strange heat rising in her chest. That's the cost of running a company, Mr. Daniel. And the cost of living? He asked quietly. She froze. The words hung in the car, heavier than the music. For a moment, her reflection in the glass felt like a stranger, a woman staring at herself and realizing how empty her apartment would be when she arrived. She swallowed hard. You ask too many questions for a driver. Daniel's lips curved faintly. Forgive me, Ma. I'm just used to people talking on long rides. Well, I'm not people, she said sharply. I can see that, he murmured, his tone respectful but tinged with something else. Admiration? Amusement? She couldn't tell. The rest of the drive was quiet again, but it wasn't empty. It pulsed with something unspoken, awareness, fragile, tugging at the edges of her control. When they pulled up to her mansion, Daniel got out and opened her door as always. She stepped onto the driveway, cool air brushing her face, her heels clicking softly. Good night, Ma, he said. She paused, her back to him. For one reckless moment, she almost turned, almost said thank you, for the music, for noticing, for speaking what no one else dared. But the walls came up again. She only nodded and walked inside. Daniel watched her go, then leaned briefly against the SUV, staring at the dark sky. Morning came with the usual Lagos orchestra, the distant honk of buses, the sharp call of a hawker, the whir of a generator kicking to life. Daniel had arrived earlier than necessary, polishing the SUV even though it already shone. He wanted to be ready before she stepped out. Sophia Arden was not the kind of woman you kept waiting. At 7:30 a.m., she emerged. Today she wore a white button-down tucked into a fitted pencil skirt, her hair straightened and sleek, a pair of sunglasses perched on her nose. She looked effortless, commanding. Daniel opened the door. Good morning, Ma. She slid in, giving him only the briefest nod. Morning. As they joined the morning rush, Sophia focused on her tablet, answering emails. Daniel wove through traffic calmly, even when Danfo drivers swerved recklessly. It was Sophia who broke the silence first this time. You didn't use the shortcut today. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. Too many tankers on that route this morning. I checked before leaving. Her head lifted slightly. He checked? Most drivers didn't bother with such foresight. You checked the traffic updates? She asked, faint surprise in her tone. Yes, Ma. Lagos is unpredictable. Better to be safe than sorry. Sophia looked back at her tablet, hiding the tug at her lips. She almost smiled. Almost. Later that afternoon, she had a meeting in Abuja. After it ended, Daniel was waiting outside, leaning casually against the SUV, sunglasses on, sleeves rolled up. Several women walking past turned their heads, whispering and giggling. Sophia noticed immediately, and hated that she noticed. He straightened the second he saw her. Ready, Ma? Yes. Her tone was crisp, but something about the way those women stared at him stuck in her chest. Irrationally. Once inside, she glanced at him through the rearview mirror. You seem comfortable being admired. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Admired? You didn't see those women staring at you? He chuckled, the sound low and warm. I was watching for you, not them. Sophia's heart skipped, but her face remained perfectly neutral. She turned to her phone. Keep your eyes on the road. Yes, Ma, he replied, amusement threading his voice. The days rolled into a rhythm. Daniel learned her patterns, the way she tapped her pen when stressed, how she preferred ginger tea after long hours, how she disliked drivers who talked too much on the phone. Sophia, against her will, began to notice him too. His patience in traffic. His quiet humming when the radio played old-school Nigerian classics. The way he sometimes smiled at children selling sachet water by the roadside, a rare, genuine smile that softened his otherwise sharp features. One evening, heavy rain caught them on the third mainland bridge. Traffic was at a standstill, horns blaring, wipers struggling against the sheets of water. Sophia sighed, massaging her temples. 2 hours wasted, she muttered. 3, if we're unlucky, Daniel said lightly. She shot him a look. That's not funny. Maybe not, Ma. But better to laugh than cry. To his surprise, a small laugh escaped her, short, reluctant, but real. She turned to the window quickly, hiding it. Focus on the road. Daniel's lips curved. He didn't push it. But something inside him stirred at the sound of her laughter, like a secret he wanted to hear again. That night, as he dropped her home, she lingered in the car a second longer than usual. Daniel, she said suddenly. He turned slightly in his seat. Yes, Ma? You're not what I expected in a driver. His brows lifted. Is that good or bad? She hesitated, then shook her head, opening the door. Forget I said anything. Good night. Daniel watched her walk into the mansion, rain still dripping from the eaves. His chest tightened, though he couldn't say why. The night before the trip, Daniel was parked in his usual spot, waiting for Sophia to finish at the office. The lobby glass door slid open, and there she was, heels clicking, blazer draped over one arm, face unreadable as always. He opened the door for her. She slid into the back seat without a word. They drove in silence, Lagos traffic glowing around them in shades of red brake lights. Halfway across the bridge, Sophia finally spoke. Clear your schedule for the next 2 days. We're traveling. Daniel glanced at her through the rearview. Traveling, Ma? Abuja. Business conference. I need you there. Her tone was clipped, matter of fact, but there was a flicker of something softer in her eyes. We leave tomorrow morning. Daniel's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. Abuja. That meant hotels, longer hours, proximity. His heartbeat kicked once, hard, but he kept his voice steady. Yes, Ma. I'll be ready. She nodded and looked back down at her phone, but Daniel didn't miss the subtle way she shifted in her seat, as if she too felt the weight of what she'd just set in motion. The next morning, when Sophia stepped out of the mansion, suitcase in hand, Daniel was already there. He looked sharp in a fitted black shirt, trousers pressed, shoes polished. The early sun caught the smooth planes of his face, and for one unguarded moment, Sophia's eyes lingered longer than they should have. He took the suitcase smoothly. Good morning, Ma. Morning. She adjusted her sunglasses to hide her expression. But inside, her chest betrayed her. Why did his presence feel different today? The conference in Abuja was a storm. Sophia dazzled through the sessions, battling men who underestimated her, charming those she needed, slicing through proposals with surgical precision. Daniel stayed in the shadows, always within reach but never intrusive. He opened doors, handled logistics, shielded her from overeager journalists. From the outside, he was only her driver. But she felt him there, a steady gravity in the chaos. That night, Sophia sat alone in her suite, exhaustion clinging to her like a second skin. She had smiled, charmed, fought, performed. But now, with the lights low and silence pressing in, her mask was slipping. A knock sounded. Daniel entered with a tray. Room service said you hadn't ordered anything. She frowned. That's not your responsibility. And letting you faint from hunger is? His tone was even, respectful, but his eyes were unflinching. You need food. Sophia opened her mouth to protest, but the aroma of jollof rice and grilled chicken betrayed her. Her stomach growled audibly. Daniel's lips twitched. See? For the first time in weeks, Sophia laughed. Really laughed, soft, tired, but genuine. She shook her head. You're impossible. He didn't move. He just stood there, steady, watching her. And she hated how much she wanted him to stay. Her voice dropped. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to hold everything together? To never slip? Daniel's expression softened, but his voice stayed steady. Yes. She looked up, startled. What do you mean? I've been carrying my family since my father died, he said quietly. Holding things together. Smiling when there's nothing to smile about. Pretending it's easy, because if I don't, everything falls apart. The room stilled. Sophia's throat tightened. For a terrifying moment, she felt seen. Not as CEO Arden. Not as Madam. Just Sophia. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked it away, forcing steel back into her voice. You shouldn't talk to me like this. It's not professional. Daniel held her gaze. Maybe. But sometimes what's human is more important than what's professional. The silence between them thickened, humming with something unsaid. Sophia dropped her eyes to the food, picking up the fork just to distract herself. But her hands trembled. And for the first time in years, she let someone else see it. That night, when Daniel left her suite, he paused outside the door, exhaling deeply. He had crossed an invisible line, and so had she. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something dangerously close, recognition. Two people, mirrors of each other, carrying worlds on their backs. The second day of the Abuja conference carried a different weight. Sophia was sharp, polished, commanding, but Daniel, standing near the back of the grand hall, could tell something was wearing on her. The slight tremor in her pen as she took notes. The pause, half a second too long, before she answered certain questions. Still, she stood tall behind the long panel table, heels grounded, voice even. Until Chief Adeyemi leaned forward into his microphone. Ms. Arden, he said, voice dripping with patronizing charm, while your presentation was eloquent, some of us can't help but wonder, are these really your ideas? Or simply the remnants of your late father's work, polished and paraded as your own? The air shifted. Laughter rolled in low ripples across the hall. Cameras flashed. Someone coughed into the microphone at the far end of the table. Daniel saw her freeze. Just for a second. Her eyes flicked down to her notes, then up again, her lips pressing into a thin line. He knew that wound. The one they pressed over and over, the shadow of her father, the ghost they used to cut her down. Daniel's jaw tightened. And before Sophia could respond, a sharp crash echoed from the side of the stage. Every head turned. Daniel had stumbled against a stack of bottled water, sending several clattering noisily to the ground. His quick apologies filled the sudden hush, breaking the rhythm, scattering the attention. Sophia inhaled, steady, deliberate, and when she spoke, her voice sliced through the silence. My father left a company, she said, her tone smooth as steel. But companies don't sustain themselves on ghosts. Numbers don't lie. Performance reports don't lie. And mine show growth, innovation, and profit, not nostalgia. Shall we move to the next question? A ripple of applause swept the hall. Adeyemi leaned back, expression curdled, his jab neutralized. Daniel had already righted the bottles, his face composed, as if nothing had happened. But Sophia knew. He had given her a breath, a sliver of time to regain control. And it had been enough. Later that evening, when the conference dinner wound down, she found him waiting by the car. She stopped in front of him, arms folded, searching his face. You did that on purpose, she said softly. Not accusing. Not angry. Just aware. Daniel met her eyes, steady as always. I didn't like the way he spoke to you. For a moment, her mask slipped. She exhaled, long and slow, her gaze drifting away. They always say it. That I'm just filling his chair. That everything I do is just borrowed from him. Her voice caught, just slightly. Sometimes I almost believe them. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to step closer, to erase that doubt from her completely. But he didn't. He stayed where he was, his voice low, grounded. They don't see what I see, he said. They don't see the hours you work. The way you fight for every detail. The weight you carry that no one thanks you for. That's not borrowed. That's yours. Sophia's throat worked, her eyes glistening in the dim hotel lights. She blinked quickly, trying to gather herself. But her voice betrayed her, softer now. You talk like you know me. Daniel held her gaze, unflinching. Maybe I do. Maybe better than they ever will. The air between them thickened, humming with something dangerous and unspoken. Sophia looked away first, swallowing hard, her arms wrapping tighter around herself. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in front of anyone, seen. And that terrified her more than anything Chief Adeyemi could have said. When she finally climbed into the car, Daniel closed the door gently, circling to the driver's seat. They drove back in silence, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy. Alive. Sophia stared out at the blur of Abuja's night lights, her pulse still unsteady. And Daniel? Daniel kept his eyes on the road, his grip tight on the wheel, fighting the pull he knew he could no longer ignore. The morning sun spilled across the hotel's polished lobby, gold light catching on the marble floors. Sophia descended the staircase gracefully, her cream blouse tucked neatly into tailored trousers, every detail of her outfit deliberate. She walked with her usual air of authority, but Daniel, standing near the car outside, noticed the faint dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept well. He opened the door for her as she stepped out. "Good morning, Ma," he said, his tone steady, respectful. "Morning," she murmured, sliding into the car. Her voice was quieter than usual, a residue of last night lingering between them. At the hotel's valet stand, two conference staffers whispered as Daniel returned inside briefly to confirm the itinerary. "Ah, see them," one of the women said with a smile. "That must be her husband. He was with her everywhere yesterday, carrying her things, making sure she was fine." The other laughed. "And fine he is, N. See that jawline? See that suit? She married well." Daniel returned just in time to hear the tail end of it. His brow arched, but he said nothing, simply walking past them. Sophia, however, caught the glance they threw her as she stepped back toward the elevators with him. "Did you hear what they said?" she asked dryly, once they were out of earshot. Daniel tilted his head. "About me being your husband?" Sophia's eyes widened. "So you heard?" "I did," he said calmly, the corner of his mouth twitching. "I didn't think correcting them was necessary." She stopped in the hallway, turning sharply to face him. "Not necessary? They think that I'm married to you." Daniel's voice was low, steady. His gaze lingered on her a beat too long, and something in her chest tightened. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, struggling for words. Finally, she scoffed, adjusting her bag. "Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous." Daniel let out the smallest chuckle. "If you say so, Ma." Her eyes narrowed, but the heat rising in her cheeks betrayed her. She spun on her heel and marched toward the elevator, leaving him to follow. That evening, at the gala dinner, the case of mistaken roles grew worse. They arrived at the ballroom together, Sophia poised in a flowing emerald dress that made heads turn, Daniel in his dark suit, quiet and unassuming at her side. They hadn't even taken 3 steps in before a foreign investor approached, hand extended. "Mrs. Arden," the man greeted warmly, before nodding at Daniel. "And this must be your husband. Strong man. Keeps close, eh?" Sophia choked on her breath. He's not." But the investor had already moved on, smiling, chatting about the company. Daniel leaned slightly closer, voice low enough that only she could hear. "Seems like we make a convincing pair." Her jaw clenched, but her pulse betrayed her. She forced her attention back to the investor, every muscle in her body taut with restraint. By the time they finally slipped away from the crowd, Sophia's face was flushed, from wine, from frustration, or from something else entirely, she didn't know. She turned on him the moment they were alone in the corridor. "This is getting out of hand," she hissed. Daniel raised his brow. "And what exactly do you want me to do?" "Wear a sign that says driver." Her lips twitched despite herself, caught between laughter and irritation. She hated that he always managed to disarm her. "You're insufferable," she muttered, brushing past him toward her room. Daniel watched her go, the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. He hadn't touched her. He hadn't crossed any line. But the world had, and for the first time, Sophia wasn't sure she hated it. That night, alone in her suite, Sophia stood before the mirror, staring at her reflection. She tried to steady her breathing, but her heart refused to obey. Because the truth was gnawing at her, every assumption they made about him being her partner had felt wrong, yes. The Abuja sun pressed hard against the tall glass panes of the hotel lobby, gilding the marble floor in unforgiving brightness. Sophia descended the staircase with her usual poise, a cream blouse tucked neatly into tailored trousers, hair swept into a knot that betrayed nothing of her restless night. Daniel was already outside, standing near the car, his hands loosely clasped behind his back. His suit was sharp, as if he had slept soundly, though Sophia suspected he hadn't. He never looked tired, but something about his silence always hinted at battles fought in private. He opened the door for her without a word. "Good morning," she said softly as she slipped in. "Morning, Ma," he replied, his tone as even as ever. Inside, the car hummed with quiet. For a while, the only sound was the muted whir of the AC and the city's slow stir outside. Sophia pressed her hands together in her lap, nails grazing against her palm. "Yesterday was exhausting," she said finally. Daniel's eyes flicked to her briefly in the rearview, then back to the road. "You carried it well." Her lips curved faintly, though it was more bitter than amused. "Carried it. Endured it. That's what it always feels like. Like I'm enduring." "You did more than endure," he said simply. "You owned the room. They'll remember that." She turned her head toward the window, watching Abuja blur past. For a long time, she didn't speak. Then, quieter, "Do you ever get tired of it?" He glanced at her again, brow slightly furrowed. "Tired of what, Ma?" "Of people underestimating you. Dismissing you. As if everything you are is less than what you know you are." Daniel didn't answer immediately. His hands tightened slightly on the wheel, the only betrayal of thought. "Yes," he said at last. His voice was steady, almost too steady. "But I've learned to let them think what they want. Their doubts don't change who I am." Sophia looked at him in the mirror, at the sharp line of his jaw, the quiet certainty in his eyes. And for a moment, one dangerous, fragile moment, she wished she could borrow that steadiness, let it shield her. But she only nodded, leaning back against the seat, closing her eyes. For the rest of the drive, silence wrapped around them again. Not empty silence. Not hostile silence. Something else. A silence that felt like understanding. The airport lounge buzzed with the muted chaos of departures, rolling suitcases, clipped voices, the occasional burst of laughter from travelers sharing stories over coffee. Sophia sat near the wide glass windows, a magazine in her hand she wasn't reading. The sunlight pressed against the glass, silhouetting the planes as they taxied across the runway. Her eyes, however, kept drifting, to where Daniel stood a few feet away, speaking with the airline staff at the counter. Efficient. Calm. Even here, he seemed to command attention without trying. When he returned, she closed the magazine, pretending she'd been absorbed in it. "We'll be boarding in 20 minutes, he said, his tone as professional as ever. She nodded. "Thank you." He moved to sit a chair away, leaving the respectful space that had always defined their arrangement. And yet, Sophia could feel him. The solidity of him. The quiet presence that had steadied her the night before. For a moment, she wanted to close the gap. To lean into the silence and ask questions she had no right to ask. But she didn't. She straightened her shoulders, pulling her guard back up like armor. On the plane, Sophia took the window seat. Daniel slid in beside her, his broad frame filling the narrow space effortlessly. As the engines roared to life, she pressed her fingers to her lap, nails digging lightly into her palm. Flying had never unnerved her, she'd traveled enough times, but something about this flight felt different. Heavy. Daniel noticed. He always noticed. "Are you all right, Ma?" Sophia turned her head, caught off guard by the softness in his voice. Not just polite concern. Real concern. She forced a small smile. "I'm fine." The seatbelt sign flickered on overhead. The plane jolted forward, wheels rattling against the tarmac before lifting into sky. Sophia exhaled slowly, eyes shut against the press of altitude. And then she felt it. The faintest brush, Daniel's hand resting near hers on the armrest. He didn't touch her. He didn't cross the line. But the nearness of it steadied her pulse, eased the tightness in her chest. Her eyes opened. She turned her head slightly, finding him watching the clouds beyond the window, his jaw set as if nothing at all had happened. For a long moment, she just watched him. And when she finally looked back at the clouds, something shifted inside her, something she wasn't ready to name. They landed in Lagos at dusk, the city glowing in golden shadows. Daniel walked half a step behind her through the terminal, carrying her bag, as he always did. But this time, Sophia was acutely aware of the space between them. Of how everyone else might see them, a woman and her driver. A boss and her employee. And yet, as her heels clicked against the tiled floor, she realized with a start, that wasn't how it felt anymore. Not to her. Back in Lagos, Sophia slipped into her rhythm quickly: boardroom meetings, client calls, the endless stream of numbers and negotiations that built her fortress of control. But Daniel noticed the cracks. The way she lingered a second longer in the back seat before stepping out at the office. The silence, heavier now, when they drove together through the city's traffic. The quick glances she thought he didn't catch. It might have stayed between them, quiet, unspoken, if not for the whispers. It started at the company's headquarters. A secretary, leaning against the reception desk, lowered her voice as Sophia swept past. "Have you noticed? She's never without him these days. Abuja, the gala, even here." Another giggled. "Driver? Please. Did you see the way he looks at her? People are saying it's more than that." The words floated just loud enough for Sophia to hear. She didn't break stride. Didn't even blink. But inside, her stomach twisted, heat crawling up her neck. By the time she reached her office, her hands trembled as she dropped her bag on the desk. She hated it, hated that they had given shape to something she herself couldn't name. That evening, as Daniel held the car door open for her, she slipped inside with sharper movements than usual. The drive home was thick with silence. Finally, halfway down a Koi bridge, she spoke. "Do you know what they're saying?" Her voice was cool, but underneath it, unsteady. Daniel glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "About Abuja?" Her eyes snapped to his reflection. He knew. Of course he knew. "They're saying it's us." She swallowed, forcing the word out. "That there's something inappropriate happening." Daniel's jaw flexed, his hand steady on the wheel. "And do you believe them?" Sophia froze. She had expected denial, maybe reassurance, not the quiet weight of that question turned back at her. Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked away, out at the blur of city lights, her pulse drumming in her ears. When they pulled into her driveway, Daniel parked smoothly, stepping out to open her door. She hesitated before getting out, her fingers gripping the leather seat. Finally, she rose, meeting his gaze under the dim glow of the porch lights. "They're wrong," she said firmly, though her voice wavered. "Whatever they think they see, it's not real." Daniel studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, with a small nod, he stepped back, giving her space. But as she walked inside, her chest tight and her eyes burning, Sophia realized something terrifying. It wasn't their whispers that unsettled her. It was that she wasn't sure anymore if they were wrong. The Arden estate glowed with soft amber light, the kind reserved for dinners where appearances mattered more than the food. The long dining table stretched before Sophia, crystal glasses catching the light, silver cutlery lined like soldiers. Across from her sat her mother, regal in her lace wrapper, rings glinting with every careful movement. Beside her, Uncle Richard, her father's elder brother and one of the company's trustees. Sophia knew the rhythm of these dinners. They were meant to be comforting, familial. But tonight, something hung in the air. A rehearsed weight. Richard dabbed at his lips with a napkin before clearing his throat. "Sophia, your performance in Abuja was commendable. The papers can't stop talking." Her mother smiled tightly. "We're proud of you." Sophia inclined her head. She should have felt pride. Instead, she felt the pause, the unfinished sentence lurking in Richard's tone. And then it came. "But you know success comes with scrutiny," Richard continued, his baritone firm. "Investors, stakeholders, even the press, they all want assurance. They want stability." Her fork stilled against her plate. "Stability," she repeated flatly. Her mother reached across the table, laying her hand on Sophia's wrist. "Darling, people are starting to ask questions. About your future. About who stands beside you." Sophia's jaw clenched. "You mean marriage?" The silence that followed was her answer. Richard leaned back, fingers steepled. "Perception matters. No one wants to pour millions into a legacy that seems unsettled. A husband beside you, it calms doubts. Protects what your father built." Sophia pushed her chair back, the scrape loud in the elegant dining room. "So that's it. After everything I've done, it's still not enough. I need a man beside me to make it valid." Her mother's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. "It's not about need, Sophia. It's about survival. We've already had inquiries. Suitors who understand the position you're in. It would be wise to consider them." Suitors. The word made her skin crawl. She rose from the table, every muscle tight, and excused herself without waiting for permission. The night air hit her like a slap. Cool, sharp, alive with the hum of crickets. She crossed the driveway quickly, heels clicking against the stone, needing space to breathe. And there he was. Daniel stood near the car, posture straight as always, the quiet sentinel. The porch light caught on the sharp lines of his face as he watched her approach. "Everything all right, Ma?" he asked softly. She stopped a few feet from him, chest rising and falling too fast. For once, she didn't have the strength to mask it. "They want me to marry," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. Daniel's expression didn't flicker, but something shifted in his eyes, a storm behind calm waters. "For stability," she added, almost spitting the word. "As if all I've done means nothing unless I have a ring to prove it." Daniel's gaze held hers, steady, grounding. Then he said, quiet but firm. "You've already proven yourself." Sophia's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him. Desperately. But the echo of her uncle's words rang louder. She swallowed hard, forcing composure. "Belief doesn't keep companies from being stolen, Daniel. It doesn't silence whispers." For a moment, neither of them moved. The distance between them felt charged, fragile, alive. Then Sophia tore her gaze away, walking briskly toward the car before she shattered completely. Daniel opened the door without a word. But as she slid inside, heart pounding. The idea of marriage as a weapon against her had enraged her. The Arden mansion was too quiet after the dinner. The chandelier lights had dimmed, the staff had retreated, and only the echo of her uncle's words remained. Marriage. Stability. Suitors waiting in the wings. Sophia shut her bedroom door harder than she intended. She leaned against it, arms wrapped tightly around herself. For the first time in years, she felt 16 again, cornered, unheard, expected to perform a role she never auditioned for. She stripped out of her dinner gown, pulled on a silk robe, and sat before the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked flawless, smooth skin, perfect makeup, every strand of hair in place. But her eyes betrayed her, wild, frantic, desperate to escape a cage invisible to everyone but her. She thought of Daniel. The way he had looked at her outside, calm, grounding, unshaken by her storm. She wanted to call him up, to hear that low, steady voice that cut through chaos. But she didn't. Not tonight. Not after they had made her feel small in her own home. So she did what she always did, she buried the hurt in work. She opened her laptop, pulling up strategy reports and financial projections, eyes scanning numbers that blurred into each other. Anything to remind herself that she had built something no husband, no ring, no family decree had given her. Hours slipped by. Midnight bled into dawn. And still she sat at the desk, robe loose around her shoulders, eyes burning. The next morning, when Daniel pulled the car around, she didn't look at him. Didn't greet him. Just slipped into the back seat with sunglasses shielding her tired eyes. The city rushed past, hawkers balancing trays of fruit, children in school uniforms chasing buses, the sharp chaos of Lagos traffic. Daniel drove in silence, as he always did, but today the silence was heavier. He noticed her stiff shoulders, the way her hands twisted in her lap, but he didn't ask. Not this time. Instead, when he pulled up outside the office, he simply said, "Take your time today, Ma. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." Her head jerked up, surprised. She hadn't spoken a word, hadn't let anything slip, and yet he had seen her anyway. For a heartbeat, their eyes met in the rearview mirror. Then Sophia opened the door without a word and walked briskly into the building. But all through her meetings, through the flood of handshakes and numbers, his words clung to her like a second skin, "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." And for the first time, she wondered if maybe he was wrong, or if maybe he was the only one who was right. The weekend brought no rest. Sophia had barely returned from a grueling client dinner when her mother summoned her to the garden. The Arden estate's lawn stretched wide, manicured hedges glowing under lantern light. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, her stomach twisted at the sight of two unfamiliar men standing beside her uncle. "Ah, Sophia," her mother said smoothly, gesturing toward the guests as if unveiling a surprise. "Come, meet them." Her heels crunched softly against the gravel as she approached. Both men wore expensive agbatas, their smiles practiced, their postures exuding wealth and entitlement. Richard's baritone filled the air. These are Adewale and Femi. Good families. Educated abroad. Men who understand the weight of legacy. Sophia froze, every muscle taut. They weren't even pretending anymore. Her mother's hand grazed her arm gently, coaxing. Just dinner, darling. Conversation. Nothing more. But Sophia knew better. This was the beginning. The men bowed slightly, each eager to impress. One spoke first, his tone syrupy. We followed your career for years, Miss Arden. Remarkable work. It would be an honor to compliment such strength. Compliment. As though she were incomplete. Her smile was razor thin. Thank you, she murmured, her voice betraying none of the fire raging inside. From the far edge of the garden, Daniel stood by the parked cars, watching with the same stillness he always carried. His presence wasn't meant to intrude, just to wait, to protect. But Sophia felt him. Even as the suitors spoke, even as her uncle praised their pedigrees, her eyes flickered once, unbidden, to where he stood in the shadows. Solid. Silent. The only man in the garden who saw her not as a trophy, not as a deal to be struck, but as herself. She tore her gaze back quickly, refusing to let it linger. The conversations dragged, laughter ringing false, the suitors performing like actors on a stage. Sophia played her part, smiling, nodding, offering just enough. But beneath the mask, her pulse hammered, her skin prickling with a single realization. They will not stop until I choose. Much later, when the garden had emptied and the lanterns flickered low, Sophia walked briskly toward the cars. Her heels clicked too loud against the stone path. Daniel opened the door for her, as he always did. She slipped inside without looking at him, every nerve stretched thin. The drive back to her apartment was silent, Lagos lights streaking past the windows. But the silence was different now, heavier, suffocating. When he pulled up, Daniel stepped out to open her door. She hesitated, fingers gripping the leather seat. For a fleeting second, she wanted to tell him everything. To whisper, they're choosing husbands for me like I'm property. They're forcing me into a cage I can't escape. Instead, she exhaled sharply, gathered her composure, and stepped out. Good night, Daniel. He gave a small nod. Good night, Ma. She walked into her building with her chin high, her step steady, but the moment the door shut behind her, she leaned against it, trembling. Because deep down, she already knew. When the time came, she wouldn't choose Adewale. She wouldn't choose Femi. The only man she could even imagine standing beside her was the one who had never asked for her hand at all. The city stretched before her window, restless and loud, but in the apartment it was unbearably still. Sophia's robe clung to her shoulders, her arms folded tightly against herself as though that might keep her from unraveling. Her family's words echoed in her head, stability, suitors, marriage. She thought of the polished smiles in the garden, of her uncle's baritone, of her mother's hand pressing gently against hers, urging her toward a future she didn't choose. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from her mother. They were impressed. Adewale will call tomorrow. Sophia's throat tightened. She pressed the phone face down and turned away. Her pulse raced, her thoughts a blur of words she didn't want to hear again, stability, suitors, legacy. The buzzer sounded. A soft chime, but it jolted her like a slap. She already knew who it was. Daniel. He stood in the doorway, his frame steady, briefcase in hand. You left this in the car, Ma. She reached for it, their fingers brushing. She should have let him go. She should have thanked him, shut the door, buried herself in work until exhaustion numbed her. Instead, come in. He obeyed, stepping into the apartment with that same unassuming steadiness. He waited, silent, as she walked to the center of the room, her robe trailing softly against the floor. When she turned, her face was composed, every line deliberate, like she was back at the boardroom table. They won't stop. My family, the board, the press. They've decided I need a husband to make me credible. To make me stable. The word tasted bitter. Daniel's gaze held hers, steady, unreadable. I won't marry a stranger, she pressed on. I won't let them barter me off like an asset. If it must be someone, she exhaled sharply, gathering herself. It has to be someone I can trust. Someone who doesn't want my name, or my company, or my image. Her arms dropped. Her eyes found his. I need it to be you. The words struck the room like a crack of thunder. Daniel didn't flinch. His silence wasn't surprise, it was weight. He measured her, as if turning her request over from every angle. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, deliberate. "You're asking me to be your husband?" "Yes." The word left her in a rush, too fast, too raw. He studied her, the tightness of her jaw, the fire in her eyes that tried to mask fear. "You don't mean marriage," he said at last. "You mean protection." Her lips parted, but no denial came. Daniel's shoulders rose, then eased with a slow breath. His gaze softened, but his tone remained steady. "Ma, if this is what you truly need, not what they've forced you to believe, then I will stand with you." Sophia's breath caught. For a moment, she forgot to move. "But understand this," he continued, voice firm. "Marriage isn't a performance to me. Not something I can put on and take off when it suits. If I do this, I do it fully. Not for appearances. Not for convenience. For you." The words pressed against her like a weight she wasn't prepared for. She wanted to argue, to reduce it back to strategy and optics, but his gaze anchored her, made it impossible to cheapen what he was offering. She turned toward the window, needing distance. The city lights blurred through the glass. "This isn't supposed to be about us," she murmured. Behind her, his voice came, calm and unyielding. "It already is." Sophia hardly slept. The city hummed outside, horns and voices weaving into the night, but inside her apartment, silence pressed against her chest like a heavy blanket. Daniel's words replayed on a loop. "If I do this, I do it fully. Not for appearances. Not for convenience. For you." She had asked for protection. He had offered something she hadn't anticipated, something real. By morning, her polished mask was back in place. A silk blouse, tailored skirt, the cool precision of eyeliner drawn sharp enough to cut. If the world was going to demand a performance, she would deliver it flawlessly. But when Daniel opened the car door for her, his eyes brushed hers with quiet steadiness, and suddenly the mask fell paper-thin. The drive to the office was thick with unspoken things. Normally she filled the silence with calls, emails, instructions. Today, her phone stayed face down in her lap. "Finally," she said, carefully, "what you said last night." Daniel didn't glance back. His voice came low, measured. "I meant it." Sophia's fingers tightened around her phone. "You make it sound absolute." He slowed for traffic, the motion unhurried. "Some things are." She let out a small, sharp laugh. "You think in absolutes, Daniel. But my world doesn't work like that. Deals, mergers, contracts, everything can be negotiated." His hands were steady on the wheel. "A contract ends. Marriage doesn't." The words unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. She turned toward the window, Legos flashing past in bursts of color, street hawkers lifting baskets, schoolchildren weaving through traffic, women in bold ochre prints bargaining at market stalls. Life moved with urgency, but she felt suspended, trapped between what her family demanded and what Daniel had laid before her. That evening, she didn't go home. Instead, she asked Daniel to drive her to the waterfront. The city stretched out behind them, neon lights flickering against the water, the air thick with salt and exhaust. She leaned against the railing, arms folded. "If we do this," she said finally, "it has to be on my terms." Daniel stood beside her, silent, waiting. "I can't afford distractions," she continued. "The company comes first. This arrangement would be for optics, for survival. Nothing changes in how I run my life." For a moment, only the sound of water lapping against the pier filled the space between them. Then Daniel spoke. "And if people believe the performance, start expecting more than optics?" Her gaze snapped to his. "Then we remind them what it is. Business. Strategy." Daniel's eyes held hers, dark, unreadable. "And if you forget?" Her throat tightened. She turned back to the water, unwilling to let him see the flicker of fear in her expression. "I won't." Silence stretched. Not empty, not cold, but heavy with all the things they weren't saying. Finally, Daniel inclined his head, the faintest nod. "Then I'll stand with you." Sophia exhaled, long and shaky, gripping the railing until her knuckles whitened. She had won, in a way. She had secured his agreement. The next morning, Sophia woke with the taste of salt and city smoke still clinging to her memory. She had barely slept, tossing between her own resolve and Daniel's words that refused to loosen their grip. But by noon, her decision was made. If her family wanted stability, if they wanted a name to silence the whispers, they would have it, but it would be her choice, not theirs. The Arden estate was already lit for another dinner by the time she arrived. A long table stretched under the chandeliers, heavy with crystal, porcelain, and unspoken judgment. Her mother sat poised at the head, Uncle Richard beside her, and at least 2 potential suitors leaned back in their chairs, smug in their agbatas. Daniel followed her in, not as her driver tonight, but as her shadow. He stood just behind her chair, his posture unyielding, his expression unreadable. Sophia let the chatter die before she spoke. "I won't waste your time," she said, her tone crisp, businesslike. "I've made my decision." Her mother's smile was cautious, her uncle's brow arched. "Oh?" Richard's baritone rumbled, expectant. "And who have you chosen?" Sophia rose from her seat, spine straight, chin high. The silk of her gown shimmered as she turned slightly, just enough to let the room's eyes shift to the man standing behind her. Daniel. The silence that followed was visceral. Fork stilled. One of the suitors laughed nervously, thinking it a jest, until he saw her expression. Uncle Richard's face darkened, disbelief giving way to fury. "Your driver?" Sophia didn't flinch. "My choice." Her mother's hand trembled slightly on her wineglass, but her voice was even, sharp. "Sophia, think carefully. This isn't about romance. This is legacy. Appearances." "I am thinking carefully," Sophia shot back. "I built this company day and night. I carried Arden Holdings when everyone else thought I'd fail. And now, when you say I need a man at my side, you don't get to dictate who that is. Daniel has stood beside me longer, steadier, than anyone in this room. That's stability." Her uncle pushed back his chair, anger sparking in his eyes. "This is madness. The board will never accept." "They don't need to accept," she cut in, voice like steel. "They only need to see that I'm not bending to their game. I've made my choice, and if they want to question it, let them question me directly." Type Part 2 if you enjoyed this story.